What do you think happens inside a countertop RO system when it sits unused for a long period of time? Because internally, these systems all have tubing, valves, and internal pumps that don't always fully dry out. For this project, the unit I tested happened to be an AquaTrue, but the question I'm trying to answer here applies to all countertop RO systems. If one sits unused, how nasty does it get on the inside? And more importantly, can cleaning and sanitizing actually bring it back to a hygienic state, so it doesn't have to be replaced altogether? To answer that question, I focused on two very common microbial indicators: total coliform and heterotrophic plate count, or HPC. Total coliform is used as a system hygiene indicator. If detected, it suggests that coliform bacteria are present somewhere in the system and that conditions allowed them to grow. It does not automatically mean the water is dangerous, and it does not mean fecal contamination. That's why E. coli is tested separately. HPC is a little different. Heterotrophic plate count measures the general population of bacteria that require organic carbon for growth and love environments like plumbing, tubing, and stagnant water. And to be clear, these aren't pathogens either, but when HPC levels get really high, it's a strong sign of stagnation and internal biofilm growth. So just to be clear, testing positive for coliform or having high HPC does not mean pathogens were present. It means the system was no longer clean from a microbiological standpoint, which is exactly what we're trying to evaluate here. And if these kind of water filter maintenance videos are helpful, give this video a like and let me know in the comments which maintenance issues you'd like to see me cover next. Before doing any cleaning at all, I collected water samples from the unit exactly as it had been sitting in storage. No rinsing, no flushing, no prep work. The goal here was to keep this realistic. Most people aren't pulling a countertop RO out of storage and immediately thinking, I should probably sanitize the inside of this thing. And with RO systems, the biggest issues usually aren't visible from the outside anyway. So this first sample represents what's going on inside of a system that's been sitting for a long period of time before maintenance. And these baseline results told a pretty clear story. Total coliform was detected. Again, that doesn't mean anything extreme or dangerous by itself, but it does indicate that coliform bacteria were present and the system wasn't hygienic after sitting unused. E. coli was not detected, which tells us this was not a fecal contamination issue. It was consistent with bacterial regrowth from stagnation. The HPC test came back as too numerous to count. In lab terms, that means the bacterial growth was so heavy that it exceeded the lab's ability to accurately quantify it. That's a strong signal that bacteria had been thriving inside the system during storage. So while this doesn't necessarily mean that the water would make someone sick, it very clearly tells us that the system needed to be cleaned and sanitized before putting it back into service. Now, before sanitizing, I decided to also descale the unit. Descaling removes mineral buildup and deposits that accumulate over time, especially if the system was used with hard water. That buildup doesn't just affect flow rate and system performance, it also creates surfaces where bacteria are more likely to attach and form biofilms. So if you're already taking a system apart to clean it, especially after long storage, this is actually also an ideal time to descale it as well. Before I even got into descaling, the first thing I did was wash both the tap water tank and the clean water tank with regular soap and water. That just helps remove any surface residue or buildup before you start running cleaning solutions through the system. For the actual descaling step, I followed AquaTrue's recommended process here. You remove the old filters and install these filter hole plugs that come with the AquaTrue descaling kit. Those plugs are important because they allow the descaling solution to circulate through the internal pump and tubing without running through the filters themselves. That protects the filters and lets you properly clean the system's internal plumbing, which is really where scale and buildup tend to accumulate. Next, I heated purified water to around 96 degrees Fahrenheit, warm but not boiling, and then filled the tap water tank to about half an inch below the handle. I added 2 packets of AquaTrue's descaling powder and stirred for about 30 seconds to make sure everything was fully dissolved. After placing the tap tank back on the base, I let the system filter for about 5 minutes, then allowed it to soak for roughly 15 minutes more. Once that was done, I poured the water from the clean tank back into the tap tank and filtered it again just to make sure the solution circulated through the system thoroughly. After the descaling cycle was complete, I discarded the water from both tanks and ran 2 full tanks of cold tap water through the system to flush everything out. At that point, the unit was properly descaled and ready for the next sanitizing step, which is where we actually address the bacteria issue. Ideal Living, the AquaTrue manufacturer, does mention bleach as an option for sanitizing, and bleach can work if used correctly, but for this project, I chose not to use bleach. The main reason is consistency and safety. Bleach requires careful dilution, accurate measuring, and proper handling. Instead, I wanted to use a product that's specifically designed for sanitizing drinking water systems, reduces user error, and is certified for this exact application. For sanitization, I used SaniSystem Liquid Sanitizer Concentrate, which is NSF certified to NSF ANSI 60. That certification matters because it means the product is approved for use in drinking water systems, specifically reverse osmosis systems and water softeners. To make the Sani solution, I filled the tap water tank with water and added 1 packet of SaniSystem concentrate. Then I ran the entire tank of sanitizing solution through the system. After that first full cycle, I dumped the solution back into the tap water tank and started another cycle. I unplugged the unit about halfway through so the sanitizing solution would sit inside the system just like I did with the descaling solution. I left it like that for about 10 minutes. Even though SaniSystem requires only 1 minute of contact time, I wanted to give it extra time to work. After that, I plugged the unit back in and let it finish the cycle. I also dispensed this solution through the spout to make sure that that part of the unit was sanitized as well. Once the sanitizing solution had gone through, I dumped it out and rinsed the system the same way I rinsed after descaling by filling the tap water tank and running full cycles through the unit. I repeated that process until I no longer saw any foam or bubbles coming out, which took about 4 or 5 full tanks of water. After sanitizing, I collected another water sample and sent it to the lab using these same tests. And the results were exactly what you'd want to see. After sanitization, total coliform was absent and the heterotrophic plate count came back below the reporting limit. In other words, the system went from clear bacterial contamination to coming back clean based on the indicators we tested. So here's what this really tells us. A countertop RO system that sits unused for months can absolutely develop bacterial regrowth inside, even if it looks perfectly clean on the outside. That doesn't mean the system is bad. It just means it needs proper maintenance before being used again. This also shows that cleaning and sanitizing can restore an unused system to a hygienic state. And one more important thing that I want to point out is that not all countertop RO systems make this easy. Being able to remove the filters and install filter hole plugs is a big deal. I know AquaTrue and Blue Vua both offer this, but not too many others do that I'm aware of. That's something worth considering when researching countertop RO systems, especially if you plan on storing them long-term at any point. And finally, after any cleaning or sanitizing process like this, it's important to reinstall brand new filters. You don't want to spend all that time cleaning a system and then put old, compromised filters back in. Now, if you want to go a step further, the next video explains how to protect a countertop RO from premature failure due to scale buildup. And it's much easier to do this proactively rather than reactively by relying on descaling solutions. Click or tap to keep watching.